Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the Cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about Bitcoin, the halving approaches. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out the sale on Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. Links in the description below. Make sure you guys check that out. We're going to end the sale after the halving sometime this weekend. I don't know exactly when, but I would go ahead and get it now if you want the subscription at the lower rate. Before we jump in, I would like to say thank you to everyone who is a subscriber here. I like to kind of take a step back when I hit these major milestones and just say, I really do appreciate everyone subscribing. It means the world to be at 800,000 subscribers. When I started the channel, I had no idea that it would grow to be this big. But here we are, and I really do appreciate everyone subscribing to the channel. And I know I don't get everything right, and I do get things wrong. But I do appreciate you guys sticking with me either way. So I just wanted to acknowledge that and to say thank you to everyone for being a subscriber. Also, the halving is almost here, and in fact, by the time you watch this video, the halving's probably already happened. I'll try to get the video out here in 30 minutes or so. If we take a look when it's going to occur, at least from when I'm recording this video, it's going to be about 5 hours. But by the time you're watching this video, it's probably going to be a lot less, and it could already be behind us. If you go look at the how many blocks, it looks like we only have about 30 blocks to go. So it is coming up really, really soon, and I just think it's such a big event. I'm going to try to live stream it. That's my goal, is to try to live stream the event. It is in about, again, 5 hours. It's going to be a little tricky because it's going to sort of correspond with some bedtime routines for my kids. But I will try to live stream it if I can. So do look out for that here in the next or I guess by the time you're watching this video, it'll be a different time. But ideally, I'm going to try to get on here live by 8:30 Eastern is my goal. But again, no promises. So Bitcoin is currently at 64K. We're going to keep this pretty short because, you guys know my thoughts on the market. But I do just want to say, there's a couple of different scenarios that could play out. And I'm sure you've seen me talk about them 1,000 times. You've probably seen everyone else talk about them 1,000 times. The sort of the two main short-term things, so sort of the most likely outcomes in the short term are either you go straight to the 20-week SMA following the halving, or you get a bounce first to go just north of the 8-week moving average. And then you resolve to a lower low in May off of whatever low this is. So those are the sort of the two most likely short-term outcomes to me. Again, I don't know which one will play out. I could certainly find evidence for both. I will say, with the S&P 500 at its own bull market support band, I really do wonder, if the S&P can go to its 20-week SMA, why can't Bitcoin? It's been a long time. And with the S&P, it had been really since November, since it had been at its 20-week SMA, and now it's there once again. And I wonder, with Bitcoin, what's to keep it from going to its own 20-week SMA? It hasn't seen it since really mid-October. So if the S&P 500 can go there, why can't Bitcoin? In fact, it's not even just the S&P. If you were to look at ETH, you can see it's been wicking down to its 20-week moving average already. You can see the riskier assets are already hitting it. If you look at Total 3, you can see that it's already been wicking down to its bull market support band. So as you go, further up the risk curve, it's easier for those assets to hit that 20-week SMA because when Bitcoin sneezes, the altcoin market gets annihilated. And you can see that. Bitcoin is still well above its 20-week moving average. In fact, for it to go to its 20-week SMA, it would require about another 15% drop from the current prices. The problem with that for things like ETH and alts is that if Bitcoin were to do that, then they likely go below their bull market support bands. And this is exactly what we saw in 2019, right? We saw ETH go below its bull market support band after that local top, just after ETH Bitcoin broke down, before Bitcoin did. So that when Bitcoin bounced off of its 20-week SMA in the short term, even though it didn't hold it as support eventually, it bounced off of it. ETH USD basically just held resistance at the bull market support band. So I do think there's some reason to think it could play out like that. As much as there very well could be sort of a relief into late April, early May. Just keep an eye on the 20-week SMA, because the hard part with it is that you can look at prior local tops, right? You can look at things like 2021 and 2019 and see that they had these rallies back up to the 8-week moving average on their first weekly close below the 8-week moving average, right? So the first weekly close below the 8-week right here in 2019, we rallied right back above the 8-week and then formed a lower high. In 2021, right? Same type of thing, right? Go below the 8-week and then rally on back up. The thing is like, we could see a weekly close below the 8-week, but we haven't necessarily even seen it yet. Also note that in 2019, after you had that rally back above the 8-week, it was after a 34% drop. At this time, Bitcoin has really only dropped about the same amount that it has been, about 20%, right? I mean, as much as it might feel like it's been more brutal this time, that's only because the altcoin market is getting hammered. But that's what alts do best. When Bitcoin sneezes, alts get annihilated. So you can see that so far, this is a pretty standard drop for Bitcoin, right? 20%, nothing too different from what we've seen. But do note that while it is 20%, the rally back to the 8-week SMA in 2019 occurred after it had gone down, closer to 30%, which would actually get you near that 20-week moving average. So it's really hard to say. And while it is convenient, of course, to compare to 2019 and early 2021, because, I'm sure everyone would like that rally back up to the 8-week SMA, there's also other examples like late 2021, where you get something like this, where you're putting in these weekly closes where the wicks are lower, right? You can see that, right? The wicks are lower there as well, just like they were over here. But you ended up just getting a capitulation down, right? So there's no guarantee, right? There's no guarantee with the market. And I think I think honestly, we're not gonna, next week will be sort of the decision point on if you're gonna bounce off of it or not. This week, I imagine it's not going to, we're not gonna fully know. I mean, it's already Friday anyways, but yeah, I think it's just, it's certainly interesting because you're not only looking at Bitcoin sort of slowly fading back in, but you can see that a lot of other markets are as well, right? Like the S&P is down to its bull market support band. ETH is down to its bull market support band, or at least it has been wicking there. It's not there at the current moment, but it has been for the last couple of days, off and on. And then you have some altcoins that are below their 20-week SMA already, right? I mean, I'm sure a lot of them are, right? I don't know if Link is. Yeah, Link is. ADA is. Litecoin is not, surprisingly. Matic is. Dot is. I mean, a lot of them are already below their bull market support band. So you can see that like the stronger assets are still above it. Bitcoin is still above it right now. But, I look at these other markets, even the Russell is below it, right? So this is a great example of how the S&P is at the 20-week, but the Russell is below it. So you could see something happen very, very similar in crypto where Bitcoin goes to its 20-week. And when it does, if and when it does, then maybe alts go below it, right? That could very well play out sometime after the halving, whether you get a rally to the 8-week SMA or not, right? And again, I don't know if we're going to go to the 8-week SMA next week or if it's going to be like, a month later. I could easily come up with a reason for either scenario. Easily. It's going to depend on what your bias is. So I really can confidently say I don't know which one's going to play out. But I will say that regardless of whether you get a relief to the 8-week or not, my expectation is that Bitcoin will go to the 20-week moving average within the next few weeks, right? Within probably either this month or next month is my guess. I mean, it's been a long time, right? I mean, it seems like we're due for it. In 2019, it took about 25 weeks, something like that. In, 2020 or so, all the way through 2021, we fell back into it in May, in fact, and that was about 32 weeks. We're currently at what, 26 weeks, right? So my guess is, sometime in the next 6 weeks, we're going to find ourselves at the bull market support band, and then we'll see what's up. Again, my guess is that if Bitcoin sort of chops around in this range for a few months, that's what should send the Bitcoin dominance to 60%, right? So if it goes down to the 20-week SMA and then it bounces back up for a little bit to the 8-week SMA, or vice versa, it goes to the 8-week first and then goes to the 20-week, it's that chopping process that should break the altcoin market down. And I mean, you can see it already happening, with ETH Bitcoin, which is something we've been following, for a long time. It's now at 0.0482. Now it is, talking about this sort of stuff on the sort of the cusp of a major Bitcoin event. There could be counter trend rallies for this stuff, but again, my guess is that ETH Bitcoin is just sort of doing something like this after breaking down, where it sort of tries to hold on for a week, but inevitably it keeps on bleeding into the summer months, where maybe it finally can potentially bottom. So that is my view here going into the halving. Remember, if there is a larger drop in the Cryptoverse following the halving, whether it's immediately after or whether it's delayed by a few weeks, one thing to remember, right? One thing that I think you should remember is that when you measure things from the peak and you go peak to peak, Bitcoin is ahead of schedule by a lot, right? It really is. It can afford to give back a lot of that and still be in line with prior cycles. We've said that forever. This is why I've said Bitcoin heavy crypto portfolio, because it's going to outperform the altcoin market until QE returns. The problem for alts, I'll tell you the problem for alts is that if Bitcoin just drops back down here to get back in line with the prior cycles, just like last cycle, it dropped back in line to get back in line with its prior cycle. If Bitcoin drops here to get back in line with the last two cycles, guess what? Alts can go back down to their lows, or they can put in new lows, because they're not that far off of their lows to begin with, whereas Bitcoin is, right? Bitcoin is already well off its low, whereas the alts, a lot of them are not. Now, some of them are, but most of them are not really that far off of their low. So, I mean, if you see a situation where Bitcoin just simply goes back to where it was in the last two cycles at this point, that's how the altcoin market can put in, a lot of alts can put in new lows, even in the halving year. And we saw that happen last cycle as well. And I know there's always going to be some type of reason for it, or justification or rationalization, but that is just what I've seen, cycle after cycle after cycle, is that alts can get that bounce in the pre-halving year, but inevitably, as you get later on in the business cycle, and we get, as the market is really starting to digest all those rate hikes and the Fed refusing to pivot sufficiently, that's where alts, the order books are thin, and that's where they just continue to just slowly bleed, not only on their USD pairs, but also their Bitcoin pairs. And then my guess is that once you start getting multiple weekly closes by Bitcoin below its 20-week moving average, I think there's a good chance that at that point, Bitcoin dominance has topped. But between now and then, I think that you're going to see Bitcoin USD sort of chop around in this range for a couple of months. And during that time, I think the Bitcoin dominance will go to 60% as ETH Bitcoin goes to 0.03 to 0.04, and alt Bitcoin pairs go all the way back down from 0.42 to where they currently are, down to about 0.25 best case scenario. And that's if you want to say that they're oscillators, right? So back down to 0.25 or so. So that is really my view right now on the market. There are also sort of other views that you could look at that sort of revolve around if it wants to follow some of the prior trends with some major geopolitical events. We did see Bitcoin over here, put in some scary wicks back in early 2022. And then they still swept the local high after that. So there is always a chance that something like that happens as well. So be ready for anything. But I do think that the market would greatly benefit from a summer lull where it just kind of gets boring for a little while and alt Bitcoin pairs are finally allowed to bottom out. That's what I think would be the best case for the Cryptoverse, is a summer where alt Bitcoin pairs are finally allowed to bottom out because no one cares anymore. All the hype is behind us. And then you start to see them find their true lows on their Bitcoin pairs. For everyone who's laughed at the idea of the devaluation of all Bitcoin pairs, they just put in a new low last week, right? They just put in a new low last week. So don't laugh at it. I mean, this is just what happened last cycle. It's just exactly what happened. And if they do come back down here, like over here, then I think there's no debating anymore that it really is following sort of what 2019 was. It's just that the reason why it was delayed until the halving year was because rate cuts occur potentially now in the halving year as opposed to the pre-halving year like last cycle. So to me, it all looks like it's playing out in a very similar manner where alt Bitcoin pairs are putting in new lows just before rate cuts arrive. The onset of rate cuts potentially as early as this summer should allow alt Bitcoin pairs to bottom out, and then alt USD pairs can find whatever low they're going to find based on how low Bitcoin goes. And then perhaps by the last rate cut, then you start to see it go the other way. The biggest counterpoint to all these views is if it's if we just get some manic blow off top or something this summer, following some type of left translated cycle. I mean, you could have a left translated cycle where the top is March, right? I mean, that's what happened in the .com crash, right? I mean, the top was in March of the election year. That's not really my base case though. But I would say that if you are to get a left translated cycle where Bitcoin just goes parabolic into all the bad news and everything, then that would sort of invalidate the views that I'm expressing. My base case, though, is that we are just simply repeating what we saw back over here, and alt Bitcoin pairs should come down as we get into the summer. And by, maybe by June, July, something like that, I could see alt Bitcoin pairs finally bottoming out, notwithstanding maybe some future Bitcoin parabolic rally, which we saw over here. But that is really my view on the market right now, and we will see if it continues to pan out or not. In the meantime, Bitcoin's at 64K. And we'll see if it goes to the 20-week SMA in the next couple of weeks, or if instead it first rallies back up to just above or just around its 8-week moving average first. But either way, I do think we are due for a test of the bull market support band here in the next month and a half. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and again, check out the sale on Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. We have tons of charts, thousands of different charts for a lot of different cryptocurrencies. If there's a lot of cryptocurrencies that you have that you wish I spoke about, or you wish you could see the charts for those cryptocurrencies, we have a lot of them on the website. A lot of people call me a Bitcoin maxi. How many Bitcoin maxis have a website with thousands of charts for altcoins, right? So I'm not. I put my maxi hat on when Bitcoin dominance is in a macro uptrend. And I don't really think you should blame me for that. But do check it out. Links in the description below. That sale will end this weekend after the halving. So make sure you lock in the low rate between now and then. And I will see you guys hopefully tonight for the live stream of the halving, which is only a few hours from now. But I can't make any promises that I'll be there. It's going to depend on how some of the family stuff goes. But I will do my best to be there to live stream the halving. Anyways, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.